Hey guys. So first of all, I just want to say Miss Cole and I both really miss you guys. We weren't ready for this year to be over. I'm glad we're getting to interact on Google Classroom. If y'all need anything, just let us know. We're here for you. I know this is all kind of weird, but we're just going to keep plugging forward. The next thing we're going to be talking about after catastrophic events is a unit on Texas ecoregions and how they're affected by weathering, erosion, and deposition. So to get us started, you need to know the regions of Texas. Now, some of y'all have gotten out and you've seen a lot of the states. Some of us probably haven't seen much more than our home in Piney Woods. So you're going to get a full tour of how awesome Texas is this week. To start off, as always, we need to do our TEK. You need to know the purpose of why we are studying this. So the next TEK that we're going to be working on is 7.8b, which asks you to analyze the effects of weathering, erosion, and deposition on the environment in the ecoregions of Texas. Let me move my little picture here so you can see it. So there's a lot to this one, and you'll notice this analyze. Analyze is a really in-depth TEK. It means you have to break things apart and really get in and figure out what makes it work and what puts it together and how things are like puzzle pieces that work together. So we're going to be spending quite a bit of time on this one to really get in depth as we have to go to analyze it. So we're analyzing the effects of weathering, erosion, and deposition on the we're not going to be covering that part yet. We're not going to worry about that right now because we need to know what are the effects on these ecoregions. Well, gosh, you got to know the ecoregions to know the effects. Okay, so we're going to be starting with that portion of it. And by the end of this video, you should understand that the ecoregions of Texas are characterized by climate and that the types of plants and animals that live there. And you know what? Gosh, that kind of sounds familiar. We'll get to that in a second. And then you need to recognize all the different ecoregions in Texas. There are 10 ecoregions that you need to know because our state is huge. So y'all know that. All right, so let me move this little sucker back down here. Hold on. And here we go. What is an ecoregion? Like, that's a weird word. I know ecosystems and I know regions, but what is an ecoregion? So an ecoregion is just an area or a region that is defined by its characteristics, such as, and this is the part that's going to sound a little familiar, the types of plants and animals that live there and its climate. It sounds like biomes, right? We just finished talking about biomes before this whole coronavirus at home thing happened. So a biome is usually a huge area like a desert. Well, we have something similar to that in Texas. It's a lot smaller. It's a little mini desert that's just part of our state, but it's part of a larger area. So an ecoregion is defined by how much rain it gets, what its temperature is, and what kind of plants and animals live there. Just like a biome, only smaller. Okay. In our state, we have 10 of them. Okay, and each of these different colors that you're seeing on your screen is a different ecoregion. All 10 of them are important. All 10 of them have different characteristics, different plants and animals that live there. There's different amounts of precipitation and different temperature regions. So we're going to show you that, I'm going to start off with our most familiar ecoregion because this is where we all live. This is the far east part of Texas. And as we look at these ecoregions, we're going to go from east to west. So we're starting at home with the Piney Woods. Now, we talked about the Piney Woods when we did our biomes. We talked about how in Gilmer, we get 35 to 40 inches of rain per year. And that amount of rain is perfect for pine trees. It allows the pine trees to grow, huge, tall, 300-foot tall pine trees that otherwise wouldn't be able to grow in this region. So because we have that amount of rain, we have seasonal temperatures. It gets hot in the summer and cold in the winter. That determines what kind of plants and animals live here. Mostly it's pine trees. We also have lots of oak trees, sweet gum trees, hickory, those hardwoods. And because we have so many trees, we have tree-dwelling species. So you get your little woodpecker here. We have squirrels. We have animals that are comfortable living their entire lives up in the air on trees. Okay, so that's because of the type of plants, it determines the type of animals, just like we talked about with biomes. Okay, so now that you know kind of what I mean when I say the temperature determines the temperature of the climate, temperature, and precipitation determines the area, we're going to start over here in the east, and we're just going to head straight across to the west, and we're going to explore our state on a little quick, very quick whirlwind tour. Now, this is not everything you need to know about the ecoregions. You're going to have an assignment where you're going to take a virtual tour of a Texas state park in each of the ecoregions, so you'll get a really good idea of what they're like. But this is just kind of a bright overview, okay? So this is the beginning of what you need to know. And we just covered the piney woods, so we're going to go straight to this little region right here, which is right next to the piney woods, and it's called the post oak savanna. So what's going on here is we're getting, in the east part of the state, we get a lot more moisture than we do in the west part. Okay, so the west Texas is super dry and super hot. So we transition as we go across the state. You start with the piney woods, which has lots of rainfall, and by the time you get to this area over here, it's like a desert. Okay, so this is our first area of transition. The post oak savanna doesn't have a lot of pine trees. It doesn't get as much of the rainfall. So there's lots of oak trees, but you'll notice in these pictures they're a little bit smaller. Okay, they don't necessarily have the huge tall trees like we do. They're a more medium-sized tree, but it is still mostly tree. Okay, so the post oak is a slightly dry region. You see in this picture down here, you get a little cactuses and stuff. So we're starting to already dry out as we go across. The next ecoregion from there is called the Blackland Prairie. So now we flattened out. Okay, there's not nearly as many trees. We don't have nearly as much precipitation in this area. Now, what's sad about the Blackland Prairie is this is the area around Dallas, and 99% of the Blackland Prairie is gone forever. It's been lost to urbanization, meaning it's become a city, or it's been lost to farmland or ranch land. So it's been completely cleared. Only 1% of the prairie is left. And there's a lot of conservation efforts to bring back the natural prairie in its original state. But right now, there's a little state park. There's a few areas that it has been preserved, and otherwise it's completely gone. So Blackland Prairie, we flattened out. We've gone now from the woods over to the prairies. The dominant plant life is grasses, although there are still a lot of trees. You can see from like this picture here, there's still a lot of trees, but there's more grass than anything else. Take a little detour now from the prairies. We're going to go down to the Gulf Coast. Now, yes, the Gulf Coast, of course, has nice sandy beaches, but most of this Gulf Coast region is actually just marshes. So it has a lot of these grassy marshlands. It's habitat for amazing birds and fish. Lots of ocean fish spawn in these areas. So these are like little nurseries for all the fish that live out in the ocean. And you notice down here, you see how pretty it is. It's a flat area. It's completely flattened out as it goes down to the ocean. And there's lots of grasses. Okay, so it's called the prairies and the marshes. That's the Gulf Coast region around Galveston and Corpus Christi, Port Aransas, those areas. Continuing to move west, we get to the cross timbers. Now, again, we're talking a transition from over here where it's lots of woods and forest to over here where we have the prairies and the desert. Okay, so as you go through the cross timbers, now it's much more of a prairie. Trees are still getting smaller. There is lots of rivers that run through this area, but the predominant species are definitely grasses. Okay, and then you continue on through the west, and now we're going to hit an incredibly unique ecoregion called the Edwards Plateau. This is the area around San Antonio and Austin, and you'll notice it's like it looks like a completely different landscape. The Edwards Plateau is an area of rock that has been uncovered. So like all the planet is, basically rock way down deep, but here it's uplifted. So it's called the Llano uplift, another term for it. And the granite, the bedrock of our planet, has actually come to the surface. So this up here is called Enchanted Rock. And you'll get to see that state park on your tour. It is a huge granite dome. And all this granite, it allows, there's not as much tree life here. You get small trees like cedar and mesquite trees. but you don't get the big, huge, tall oak trees. You don't get the big, huge, tall pine trees. None of that's around this area. One thing that there does make a lot, because of the way the granite was formed, there's tons of caves here. So like Longhorn Cavern and Natural Bridge Caverns exist in this. It's called a karst topography, karst meaning full of caves. So it's a really kind of cool area if you get to go visit it. It's semi-arid, meaning it doesn't get nearly as much as rain as we do here, but it's not a desert either. Okay. Moving, now we're going to check out to the north and to the south of the Edwards Plateau. So the Edwards Plateau just kind of, it's like our state was here and it just kind of burst up through the middle of the state, which is kind of a cool area. But above and below it, to the north and to the south, you're going to find plains and prairies. So now the land is much more flat. There's not enough rain to support much tree life. The South Texas plains have more trees because you'll notice here they're right near the Gulf. And so there's a lot of moisture that comes up from the ocean and washes onto the land, and it gives it a bit more of that moisture that it needs. However, look, here's tons of cactus, lots of different cactus species. Again, the mesquite trees that are real good for low moisture areas. And then it's mostly flat. The predominant life here is grasses. The same thing up in the north part of the state. Now, this is getting into what we call the Panhandle. Okay, so we're heading towards Amarillo up here. These are part of the Great Plains of the United States. The rolling plains, you can see here, there's a lot more hills still. And then you get a little further and you get to the high plains and it flattens out even more. Okay, so the rolling plains and the high plains, it's all a grassland. The high plains are just continuing to get further north up towards Colorado and Oklahoma and Kansas even. And because it's really, really flat and there's huge, long, big areas of land that are open, it makes it a really great place for wind farms. So they generate a lot of their energy through wind farms because the wind never stops blowing. It's very abrasive. It does a lot of erosion up there, which you'll find out next week as we study this. But you can tell they're just real flat and it's almost all grass. There's very few trees anywhere in either of these plains regions. And then the last part of our state is the Trans-Pecos. With all the ecoregions, you're going to find that they're called different things by different people. So sometimes you'll hear this called the Trans-Pecos. Sometimes you'll hear it called the desert montane. It just depends on who you're talking to and the terminology that they use. But what you need to know is it's a desert. It is very little plant life. You can see here there are plants that live there. It's not like the Sahara Desert where it's all sand, but it is very rocky, very dry, extremely arid. So there's just not enough precipitation to support much of any kind of big plant life. It's mostly scrub brush, like the mesquite or tumbleweeds, that kind of area. So El Paso would be right in here. It's just a big desert. Okay, it's a beautiful area, but they just don't get much rain. So there you go. That is our super quick tour of Texas, using the ecoregions as the guide from the lots more moisture over here in the east part of the state as we dry out through the west part of the state, and all the regions in between, and it's all big transitions as you go. So again, that's just the first kind of blush overview as you are beginning to learn about these different ecoregions. You'll be getting your assignment later for the virtual tour of all the state parks. That'll help you get a more in-depth understanding of each of them. So y'all reach out to us. Let us know if you need anything. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. You know, we miss you and we're here to help however we can. So we'll talk to you later.